We're back for round two of Stratosphere round number 21. We lost the internet. Now it's back. This gets a little tiresome. Sometimes we go for weeks and weeks and weeks without a problem, and then other times we don't go with weeks and weeks and weeks without a problem. Anyway, I was talking about Flight Simulator 2, and so back to Flight Simulator, the Flight Simulator on the Apple II. I did all the versions of that, used all of that. And then I started getting into other games. So just to we won't take all night with this, but looking back on my dim dark past on the computers that I owned, I loved the flight sims. I bought every version of that. There was a game on the Apple II called Elite, which was a space sim where you could actually shoot down other guys, and you could dock, or you could dock with like space stations, fly around and blow up other non-player spaceships, and then they'd release their cargo, and you'd suck up the cargo and stuff. And so Elite was a fantastically cool game. There was a World War I fighter plane where you look down, and it was none of this out the window flying stuff, just looking down at planes. It was like a chess game, and you'd maneuver, get behind them, and turn. And it was kind of there was a flip book game that you could do that with. So I played that quite a bit, and then right in there, I really got into the console games. So again, I was just at this lovely age. I was there for the golden age of arcades. When I was in college, right around 79, I got to the University of Florida, and they opened up a computer arcade there called Pin Pan Alley in Gainesville, Florida. And I spent most of my food money over there. I was 6'1" and about 119 pounds, and whatever money I had, I pretty much put into Missile Command. Missile Command was an awesome game. Battlezone with the tanks was an awesome game. Played the daylights out of that. There was, I think, a flying game called Red Baron, I want to say, one of these vector line games like Battlezone. I played a lot of that. Played a lot of Missile Command. Joust was an awesome game from that time back then. Joust was a fantastic, fun game. I still love seeing, every now and then I'll see Joust. And I remember very clearly in 1979 or 80 sitting at Leonardo's Pizza at the corner of University and 13th Street, and sitting at a table that had Space Invaders built into it. Or maybe that came later. Must have come later. I remember the Space Invaders console game very well. You know what? I forgot something. I can't believe I forgot this. Back when I was a little boy, I was probably 10 or 11, my dad was a hotel manager, and his former resident manager in Bermuda, the number 2 guy, my dad moved to Miami, and this guy moved to Miami. My dad managed the Sonesta Beach on Key Biscayne, and my dad's friend became the manager of the Playboy Club in Miami Beach. And we'd go to the Playboy Club, which was fun enough when you're 10 or 12-year-old boy. And they had a arcade room in there, and they had the first game ever called was called Space War. It had this super groovy kind of 60s kind of fiberglass thing, and real molded, and it was a vector game like Asteroids, but instead of being against asteroids, it was one ship versus another. And it was exactly like the space Star Trek game that I talked about. But this time you could actually shoot things and hit it and blow up. That was fantastic. And I remember the first time I went to see that game, because I'd heard about it. It was in the news, this incredible molded kind of metallic blue console and TV video game. And, and we went in there, and it was out of order, and I about lost my mind. But I ended up playing that game quite a lot. So then back to the arcade games. I played Asteroids a lot. I played... I never got into the Donkey Kong or any of that stuff. And I just kind of, I played every freaking flight sim. I played all of the Falcons, Falcon 1, Falcon 2, Falcon 4. I spent a year or two of my life on Falcon 4. I learned everything about weapon systems on Falcon 4. Got really good at guns on Falcon 4. That actually paid off. All that PC flight sim time paid off when I got invited down to Miramar, and they put me in the F-18 simulator. Computer Space, that's it. Thank you very much, Channel 178. Or Channel 78. Yeah. Computer Space, I think it was called. Anyway, I went down to the flight sim I got a call last year from a guy who was last year, said, come on down to Miramar and we'll put you in the F-18 simulator. I said, I'll find time to clear my schedule for that. And I got in there, and they put me in the bubble, not 360 degrees, probably 300-degree bubble, round all the way around and almost to the floor. They put me in the actual F-18 sim, and I said to the guy, listen, I don't care if I break the machine, I don't, or the carrier. I just want everything turned up to full realism. I want to be able to say I got this as right as I could. And I got in there on the actual F-18 combat simulator they train Marine pilots on down at Miramar, Marine and Navy guys. And with all the realism set to everything, I just did a lot of ground strafing. I hit air targets with the guns. I was shooting down their best pilots with guns in an F-18 simulator in Miramar routinely, just routinely. And getting a guy in jets with guns takes a little practice. So that was great, and it was really cool because I'd be down there with this guys. Needless to say, I worship these guys. They're, this one guy, my friend Amish, was a flight instructor for the Marine Corps in F-18s, and he's saying, okay, we'll do a little bombing, and then so I'm going to switch it to to AGs where it says AG, and I said, yeah, that's air to ground, and I said, okay, so this is the CCIP, right? Continuously computed impact point. And you go, how did you know that? And I'd say, so here's my vector, and then anywhere in this zone is the release zone, and when the caret crosses this line, that's when the bombs will automatically come off the reset. How did you know that? I said, well, so then I did in the F-18 sim with the realism all the way up. I had a bolter on the first one, hit the deck just past the fourth wire, full afterburners up and around, didn't break the airplane, didn't break the boat. Second time around, another bolter, full afterburners, missed the fourth wire, and the third time with the realism setting set all the way to full in an F-18 simulator in Miramar, I landed on a carrier. I caught the fourth wire. And the flight instructor guy was utterly, utterly amazed. And it just seemed like the right thing to do, but what I didn't tell him was I'd done it, I don't know, 700 times maybe on a PC. But all the sight pictures and all the approach, angle of attack, all that stuff worked out. So it was great. And then finally I got into the shooters, I guess. I got into the shooters. I got a decent computer to do 3D Studio Max back in about 92. And that's when I first played Castle Wolfenstein, which was the first real first-person shooter, and I loved it. Loved it. And then I got Doom, and Doom was Castle Wolfenstein times 1,000, and Doom 2 was unbelievable. And then when Quake came out, much like Quake, I think it was Quake 2. Quake 2, just something about the graphics engine on Quake 2 was so far beyond everything else. I would just shoot that blaster down the hallway for an hour, not even add anything. Just shooting down the hallway with the blaster in Quake 2. Just watch the little thing go down there, watch the hallway light up as it went down, hit the wall. And then all you get the giant bosses at the end of Quake and at the end of Doom, and you practice again. You walk into this arena or something at the end of Doom, and here's this gigantic mechanized half demon, half robot thing, and you're immediately killed. And then you think, oh, I'm going to run over here this time. No, you're killed then, and you respawn. You run over here, you're killed over here, and then you run over here, you're killed over there. My God, what do? Here's a little crack in the rocks. If I stay here and he takes a shot with his rocket, I can jump over here and reload, then I can get 15 shots over here. And it's really like a Ratchet when you're playing a tough, like a boss level guy. It's like a Ratchet. You go in there and you die, and then you figure out what you did wrong, and you make corrections and all that. So it was a blast. And I loved all those shooters. And then I really, 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 really loved the realistic shooters. The first version of Ghost Recon was fantastic. Just fantastic. I love the idea that, I got hit and my screen turns red and it slowly fades black to normal colors. I've just been shot, but apparently I'm recovering. I love the idea on games like Ghost Recon that you might survive one bullet wound, but you weren't going to survive two, or certainly not three. And so you'd start playing on Ghost Recon and things of that nature. And what's that? There's that European game. Oh man, it's a World War III game. Somebody's going to give it to me in a second. You're just a regular army grunt in the northern Russian islands. Yeah, somebody just pointed out the nail gun there on Quake 2. That was kind of weird. What is it? I want to say. Anyway, there's a European game that's a bit like Ghost Recon, but you can go anywhere. It's completely open field, and I can't believe I've forgotten the name of that. Anyway. So I love those games where they're very realistic. One hit or two hits, you're in trouble, and you got to play it smart, got to play it safe. So all those shooters were great. And then finally, really the last shooters I've played, I don't much like the shooters like Call of Duty and stuff, where you have like a preset channel. You know what I mean? You're going to have to turn left here. You're going to have to turn. I like games where you can just go around the whole map and you're not sort of taken from one scene to another. But I loved Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike, what is it? Counter-Strike Source, I guess it was. Man, and I was never young enough to be as good as these kids. I just didn't have their reflexes. Some of these kids are, 9, 14 years old, and they're doing this jumping and shooting and stuff. And but every now and then you'd get a place, you'd find a place on a map, someplace in Counter-Strike where you had a pretty good defensive position and you could just pop guys, and that was kind of fun. I played a shooter based on Black Hawk Down, Operation Flashpoint. There it is, Travis Kent, 57 for the win. I remember now. There was a pretty good shooter at the time called Black Hawk Down. And that was a great thing because it was a wide open map. You could go anywhere. And every now and then you could pick a really good sniper spot where people maybe couldn't see through trees or whatever. And you could just kill 25 or 30 guys. And it's just so satisfying being a sniper. And it was fun being a counter sniper too, because the way the graphics engines work, you've got to do something to represent the guy out there, but he's camouflaged. And you're sitting there and you're just kind of, you hope you're camouflaged, and you look around and you see all this terrain. And there's like this little bump on this terrain. There's like this little funny little bump on this. What the hell is that? And you look at it and you're just sitting there for a minute. And all of a sudden you see it move a little bit and you realize, oh, it's a sniper. That son of a bitch. He's sitting there and you're just like, off he goes. It's like, yes. I'll tell you the only one game I ever played on a tournament. The only game I ever got into a league on, a clan I should say, was Mech Warrior 3. I never got into the other Mech Warriors. The one after was not as good. The one before wasn't as good. But Mech Warrior 3, I built out a mech. I want to say it was a Supernova. I'm not sure if that's the right name. I don't remember now. It's been years. It's been 10 years. More than that. It's been almost 15 years now. But I built out a mech that instead of having just masses of lasers and weapons and stuff, it was relatively quick, but not very quick. But it just had these, I just loaded them up with these 2 autocannons. And the thing about this mech was, anything I hit with those twin autocannons, anything I hit went down. The Nova Cat, thank you very much. I'm having so much fun with you guys. I had a Nova Cat with these twin autocannons, and because it was a cool looking mech, by the way, and anything I hit would go down because these autocannons were just putting out so much, it just had so much kinetic energy. So I'm taking all these hits, and these little fast guys are running around in their fast droids, and they're popping little laser hits on me. And I had no armor. The only way I could get all of this autocannon and ammo and enough speed on there was to have very little armor. So I'm taking damage. I go, oh my God, this thing doesn't have any armor. All we have to do is just keep shooting it. Yeah, well, they kept shooting me, but I'm telling you, I know how to put autocannon rounds in front of these little fast little mechs, and I just put this burst of autocannon, and down they would go. And the second they were down, just like boom, blow them up. I was deadly in that thing. I'd love to play Mech Warrior 3 again. I would love to do it. It won't run on my computers anymore. I've still got the disc, but it doesn't. It doesn't do that. I didn't. By the way, I'm reading the comments. It's not that I dislike Call of Duty. I just prefer maps that are open maps where you can walk around and not be taken from cutscene to cutscene. Guided through. Now you have to turn up here, go up these stairs. It just feels a little more unreal to me. But the real life shooters like Operation Flashpoint or Counter-Strike Source are great. But of all the fun I ever had in computer games, it was in Mech Warrior 3 playing that was it Nova Cat again? I forgot what it is. Man, that was so much fun. And I was in a clan called Harlequin Corps, and there was a leader of that guy named Harlequin, and I was just the anvil. We had a guy wanted to team up with me. We entered into a tournament, and he would basically run around and draw fire or send people my way, and I just hit him. And the second I hit him, I knocked them down, and they didn't get back up again, which was fully frickin' amazing. So I've been talking about gaming, and I've gotten several marriage proposals. Go ahead and give me an email, ladies. I'd be happy to marry anybody who can play computer games. It's got to get the important things right. They're funny. It's like, yeah, he plays computer games. What an awesome dude. So I haven't really played anything more recent than that. I've got my PC is probably 3 years old now, and it's still pretty quick. I had a pretty good video card in it, and I'll probably just get one and do it. But what was the other thing I played? I used to play Team Fortress on, was that Quake? Must have been Quake. Was that Team Fortress on Quake? I used to play that too, and I'm not. See, the reason a guy like me is relatively slow. I mean, I was in my 30s and I was in my 40s really for most of this, so I don't have the reflexes of these guys who are super fast and they're jumping and shooting and all this other stuff. So I'm just kind of this plodding guy, you know. And I remember playing Team Fortress, and I would be the guy with the chain gun, and I would sit on the flag down those narrow corridors. These guys had to come down the narrow corridors, and I'd just step a little bit off to the side, and then I'd just crank up that chain gun in Team Fortress 2. That's it. And just step out there. And these guys are coming down there. They're just cursing me, you know. I was just camping out there, and I wasn't a respawn camper because everybody has to have their standards. But I loved doing that. I loved it. And here's Viper Check. Comes in. I've spent more time in Vipers in F-16s. I could hit anything in an F-16. I was lord of air to air. I was great with guns. I was great on ground attack. I could shoot the eye out of a Sparrow in an F-16 on a strafing mission. I was really good at it. I played a little Half-Life 2 and some of these other things, but yeah. So I basically have played almost all of this stuff, and I miss it now. I wish I was doing it. I'd love to play. You know what the hard part is, honestly, about online, because the only part that's really important about online multiplayer gaming is, by the way, I'm sure everybody who's ever played would agree with this. Hey, don't call me camping Carl Fistmeister. I wasn't a camper. I just found defensive positions around the flag and I defended. I wasn't a respawn camper. Jeez. I was. What was I going to say? Oh, when you play online, I would always try to play by myself. Rainbow Six was another game along with Ghost Recon. That's right. And I would try to get as good as I can against the computer opponent. And when I felt like I was pretty good against the computer, then I'd generally go out and look for online games. And it's like, has there ever been a game where has there ever been a game where the computer opponent is anything as good as the humans? When you get human beings playing these games, they're unbelievable how good they are. You jump up to a league game or something in online anything, and it's 100 times more difficult than the best computer opponents. Just 100 times tougher. So the great part about online gaming, I always found that the secret to online gaming was to get into a game where people were more or less at your skill level, because if they're much worse than you, it's no fun. And if they're much better than you, it's no fun. Although, frankly, it's more no fun to be better than them than it is to be much worse than them, because if they're really, 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 really much better than you, then it's just a miserable experience. It's just simply, you just wake up, you walk around, down you go. You wake up, you walk around, now this might be a decent sniper position. I think I'll kneel down, right? You turn around, some guy's knifed you, and it's like, oh, great, swell. So there are times when I would get into rooms with guys who are really good, who do nothing, play this all day, and then it's like, no. Oh, and by the way, I've been playing a couple of flight sims lately. I'm playing, was it Dawn of Flight, the World War I flight sim? I've gotten pretty good at that. That game is really fun. Great thing about World War I or World War II sims is that guns are really it. You know, I spent a lot of time launching missiles at guys. A lot of times. Lot of years. I bet I spent years of my life on computers launching AMRAAMs at guys at 30 miles away, and then getting into, Sidewinder range and getting on these guys' six and popping off a couple of 9er mics on them and letting them have a little happy birthday surprise. But gun kills in the air are really to me that's the highest form of enjoyment. Getting a guy with guns in the air. There's that Pacific War game. Oh man. It was the most recent one. I played a couple of different Pacific Fighters. Maybe it was called Pacific Fighters. Fighters of the Pacific. That was pretty cool. And I just love shooting guys down. I love it. It's really a blast. I could have done this forever, but as I said, I started out with a Star Trek game where you had to type in 1 to fire photon torpedoes, and the machine would go and teletype, no monitor. And then I've played all the way up into Dawn of Flight, and I haven't played the latest Medal of Honor or Call of Duty or any of that stuff, but I'm ready to get in there again, I guess. It's fun. Anyway, that's the short form for computer games. But man, oh man, if I could find, I'm almost tempted to go buy an older computer so I could reload my MechWarrior 3 and rebuild that Nova Cat and put those autocannons on there, because that was fully fun. That was a blast. So thank you, Fard Mohammed, for that great little piece of my childhood brought back. Kara McVeigh Jones wants to know, Bill, I can't get online without finding out about even more voter fraud that happened in this election. It's easy to see that this system can never be trusted again. Welcome 2016. If Obama isn't elected for a third term, rolls eyes. I hear you, sweetheart. How can we even go about knowing full well that the whole thing is completely corrupt? Also, what do we do to change this system altogether? Well, I had this question at an event I did in Fullerton yesterday. That's why I couldn't do Stratosphere Lounge yesterday. I was speaking out in Fullerton. Somebody said, what do you do about the voter fraud? And I think there's a couple things you can say about the voter fraud. First of all, it turns out, as I'm sure most of you know, that there was something like 57 precincts in Philadelphia. It may have been 100 and something, but I know for a fact it was in the 50s, where Mitt Romney did not get a single vote. Not a single vote. I have to interrupt myself because I see Marka Mink says you can get a patch to run MechWarrior on new machines. My God, man, send me a link. I'd do anything to get that thing back up again. Anyway, back to voter fraud. The 57 precincts where Mitt Romney didn't get a vote. Not a vote, not one. And I realize for sure the evidence that is voter fraud is because people make mistakes voting. Every precinct must have 2 or 3% of the votes, at least, I would say. And in neighborhoods where the education level is lower, the number is much higher. We're simply where the people make a mistake, they make an error, and so you would expect that if every single person in those precincts, let's just assume for a minute that there was not a single person in the entire precinct who ever had a thought to vote for Mitt Romney, not as a protest, not as a joke. Let's assume that 57 precincts, not a single one of those people went in there to vote for Mitt Romney. Random error alone, just people making mistakes alone, means that there'd be scores, if not tens, or tens, if not scores of votes for Romney, just because people make mistakes. So the fact that 57 precincts went without a single vote for Mitt Romney is utter and complete statistical proof that there was voter fraud all up and down the system. What I said to the people in Fullerton yesterday was basically this. I said, I will basically say to the President of the United States, listen, you people are the ones that are committing this fraud. All of this fraud is done by Democrats. All of the electronic machines defaulted to Obama, tried to vote 3 times for Romney, and it was only on the 3rd time that it showed Romney. They never defaulted to Romney. They always defaulted to Obama. All of the absentee ballots, all of the multiple voting are all in precincts that are Democratic precincts. They cheat to win because they think it's okay to cheat to win. Their philosophy is to say, they're right, we're wrong, so cheating to win is not a problem. Just what you have to do in order for good to prevail. And we believe that we'd rather lose honestly than win by cheating. That's because they're evil, no good for nothing, malicious swine. And we're not. We're the lords of creation, and we're decent and marvelous, honorable people. So what I would say, and what I will say after January 20th or whatever inauguration day is, when I assume my duties as virtual president, I will basically say, well, Mr. Obama, if you and the Democrats believe that you have a right to cheat to win, then why don't you be man enough? Why don't you be man enough to stand in front of the American people and tell them that? Stand in front of the American people and tell them that you think it's okay to cheat to win because you're on the side of right and Democrats are on the side of wrong. 25% of the country is going to agree with you right out of the gate. But if you really do believe that, why not just be man enough to come out and admit it? Now, if you don't think that it's right to cheat to win, which is what he'll say, of course, but he even knows it. If you don't think that it's right to cheat to win, then why don't we do this, Mr. Obama? You and Acorn and the rest of the Democrats have taken what was once the most honest voting system in the world, and turned it into a third world country. So next election, 2014, 2016, and however many elections it takes until both sides, not our side, not your side, both sides are satisfied that this is a fair election, why don't we go ahead and vote like a third world country? In 2014, why don't we simply have every single precinct in America have a little pot of purple ink, and when you hand your ballot in, they won't take your ballot until you dip your index finger in that purple ink. Everybody I know wears those little I voted badges, the little stickers every 2 years. It'd be a point of pride, right? Be a point of pride for me. So why don't we do that? Now, that won't solve much of the fraud issue in terms of people who can't vote, who are not legally allowed to vote. But simply the dipping your fingers in purple ink will absolutely prevent people from voting twice, because every single precinct should have monitors from both the Republican and the Democratic Party. And if you dip your finger in purple ink like they do in Iraq and other third world countries, at the very, 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 very least, we won't get the people voting 2, 3, 4 times. Because, and certainly in California, I don't know if it's true for other parts of the country, I'm sure it is. I walk in there and they say, "What's your name?" I say, "William Whittle." And they say, "Here's your ballot." And if somebody walked in ahead of me and said William Whittle, and I know somebody who had this happen to them, they went and said, "My name's Mark Johnson." Well, Mr. Johnson, you voted already. No, I haven't. Well, somebody's come and cast your vote for Mark Johnson in this precinct. Really? Is that right? Well, that's distressing. So the real Mark Johnson gets a provisional ballot. The person who stole his identity gets the real ballot. So ink on the fingers is the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is to say absentee ballots. Look, there's so much voter fraud going on with early voting and absentee ballots. There's so much voter fraud going on with absentee ballots that I think the benefit to society from absentee ballots is far outweighed at this point by the demise, by the downside. I'd just eliminate them. I know that's not fair to some people. Now, with the exception of the U.S. military, the U.S. military can vote the day before Election Day under controlled circumstances. They have a right to vote more than anybody. So absentee balloting, I think, is a real problem. This business about having early voting a month early, of course the Democrats want that because they cheat. So you can vote in Ohio, or you can vote rather in Minnesota early, then you just march on over to Ohio and vote there on Election Day. This early voting's got to go. And the final thing I would say, and what I said again on Wednesday about the voter fraud issue, Kara, is I would go directly at this. This is why this virtual presidency thing is going to be effective, because no one else seems to be willing to speak the truth about the issue. And the truth about voter fraud and voter suppression is this. Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, says that it's racist to demand that people present an ID in order for them to vote. He says it's unfair to low-income voters, especially black voters, inner city voters. And my response to that would be, well, first of all, Mr. Attorney General, if somebody wanted to come in and compliment you or criticize you on your decision, they'd have to show ID in order to get into your building, let alone into your office. They can't come and complain or compliment you on your idea about requiring an ID to vote because they can't get into the building without an ID. They can't cash a check without an ID. They can't do anything without an ID. But let's go to the heart of the matter, Mr. Attorney General, because I frankly think there's no room in America for the kind of racism that you're talking about, sir. Mr. Holder, you are an extremely racist individual, and I had thought that that racism was a thing of the past in this country. You apparently believe that black Americans are not capable of either walking or getting on a bus and spending 2 or 3 hours once every 8 years in order to pick up a state identification. They don't have to have a car. It's not a driver's license. I have to go down there every 4 years or every 8 years to get my driver's license renewed. And I do that because I need to drive, and I do it because I need an ID. You're saying that black people are either too stupid or too lazy to get an ID. I'm not saying that at all. The rest of the Republican Party and myself are saying that black people are as capable to get an ID as white people are. It's part of their civic duty in order to vote, and they are as absolutely able to do it as white people are. And I don't want to hear any of this nonsense about white people can just get in the car and go down to the DMV, but black people have to take a bus. I'm sorry. I spent most of my teenage years taking buses to and from, and taking a bus is not too much to ask every 8 years for you to have the opportunity to vote. And let's not can we just stop dicking around, please, Mr. Holder? We know for a certain fact that every single one of the low-income voters that you talk about have IDs because they can't cash checks without them. They can't go to the supermarket. They can't do anything without an ID. So of course they have IDs. And there's no obstruction to them getting IDs. At the well, first of all, there is no obstruction to them getting. The idea that they can't get one is a lie. It's just an outright lie. It's a lie that you tell with a straight face so that you can cheat at elections. It's quite simple, really. But even if it were true that there was an obstruction to getting an ID, the obstruction is it's a bit of trouble. It's a bit inconvenient. It takes some of your day. You have to perhaps get on a bus. It's inconvenient. That's not an obstruction. That's an inconvenience. And you cannot make the case that this obstruction is racially based. You can't say that a person in line at the DMV in order to get their ID has to wait longer or come back 5 days later, whatever, where a white person doesn't. It's absolutely, utterly untrue on its face. And it's a racist, despicable, low comment, Mr. Attorney General, because unlike you and the rest of your party, I do not think that black people are stupider or lazier than the rest of America. I think they're just like everybody else in America. They're composed of individuals. Some individuals are lazy. Some individuals are stupid. Some individuals are stupid and lazy. Most people aren't any of those things. Most people are more than willing to go out and get IDs because we both know they already have them. So somebody has to stand here and call them out and say, you want no voter IDs because you people cheat to win elections. You cheat to win. And we are simply saying to the American people, if you really believe that you're right, then stand up and tell them we think we should have a right to cheat while the Republicans shouldn't. And if you can't, you better make a better case than this about why voter ID laws are racist or discriminatory against anybody, because they're clearly not. But the problem with our society today is that no one is willing to speak the truth about anything. No one speaks the truth about anything anymore. We simply lie back and take it. The reason I took this question, Kara, is because it goes, it's a great question anyway, but the reason I wanted to take it was because it goes to what I've been saying again and again and again since the election, and that is the conservatives in this country have Stockholm Syndrome. And Stockholm Syndrome is what happens when you have a gun to your head. When you're a hostage and somebody has a gun to your head, you do everything you can. It's not even conscious. You're not even aware of it. But you do everything in your power to ingratiate yourself to the person who has a gun to your head. You want to make them like you. You don't want to cause trouble. You want to be friendly. You want to agree with them. You want to be on their side. Hey, this guy's right. Why don't you fascists out there in the U.S. Marine Corps leave these lovely Arab terrorists alone? They're not like... You're trying to save your own life. And when we don't simply stand up to guys like Eric Holder and say, Eric Holder, you're a miserable, low-life, lying, racist son of a bitch. That's what you are. You're a low-life, racist son of a bitch. And I use that term under great, great, great care and caution, because the reason I say that you're a son of a bitch and evil is because you know as well as I do what this is all about. And you are prepared to divide this country up into tribes and rule over the ruins of it. And I'm not going to simply stand here and let you get away with it. You're a rotten, no good, for nothing, racist son of a bitch. And I am not going to stand, sit, still, walk quietly while you go ahead and perpetrate this outrage on the American people. So if you think you have a right to cheat, you get out there and tell them you think you have a right to cheat. I think we have to play fair. I think you show a voter ID and I dip your finger in ink. And you know what that would mean? Does that mean it's a big Republican advantage? No. It means that we are both playing by the same set of rules. And you can't stand that idea, because every time we play by the same set of rules, you miserable low-life sons of bitches lose. Milk duds. I'm not going to start on those now, because if I start on those now, the rest of the show will be miserable. Eric Holder, let me tell you something. Eric Holder, you are the lowest miserable son I've ever seen. Oh my God, this is delicious. We'll save the milk duds till later. Kara, thank you. Excellent question. You have a superb Facebook header, by the way. Jennifer Kearns asks, it made me stupidly happy to learn that you're a fellow University of Florida dropout. Huzzah for us, Jennifer. The underachievers of the world unite. Do you have any words of advice for breaking into the punditry world without traditional credentials? I have to say that may be my favorite question ever because there's so much wrapped up into it. A little bit of sarcasm there. Stupidly happy is a fantastic term that I'm certainly going to steal without attribution. Anytime I'm talking to a fellow Gator, that makes me happy, and anytime I talk to a fellow college dropout, makes me happy. The question itself is excellent, and so that was just one for the record books. Hey, let's start at the top. It made you stupidly happy to learn that you're a fellow University of Florida dropout. Well, it just goes to show you that if you are... here's the thing about being a college dropout. Most people who are college dropouts, their college, what's the word I'm looking for? Experience, their term. It's like Bluto in Animal House, right? 5 years of college down the drain, or 7 years of college down the drain, whatever it was. So what I'm really saying is for just about every single dropout out there, their college years or their high school years or whatever were the pinnacle of their education. That was as far as they got, and then they dropped out, and it's a great term. Because the last thing I want to do is to give anybody a sense of the glamour or that this is a swell idea or any of that nonsense, because it's an utter catastrophe to drop out of school, especially when you've spent the kind of money and time I spent on it. Well, when I say me, I mean my dad and the financial aid department, which got paid back many, many years later, but they got paid back. So let's talk about this. Most college dropouts drop out, and they drop out, which means they drop out of whatever position they might have been in. They drop out of the ability to get the jobs that they would have gotten if they'd gotten their college degree. They drop out of the kind of crowds that you hang out with when you've got a college degree. You tend to be moving in higher circles, and people don't really understand really how much of life is who you know. So one of the great things about having a college degree is, number one, you meet a lot of friends in college, and those friends go on to become important people, and they're still your friends, and that's valuable. But also the college degree crowd hangs out with the college degree crowd, and since they tend to be more successful, there are opportunities for networking and so on. All this stuff actually, pays off in connections. But the reason I'm not ashamed to admit it is because, first of all, I'm not ashamed to admit anything. I know that's an odd thing to say. I have an awful lot to be ashamed of. I'm just not ashamed of it. And that's only because I've been ashamed of it, and I left most of that behind me. I mean, I did 25, 30 years out in the wilderness, broke, lonely, and pretty desperately unhappy. And you then suddenly find yourself doing what I'm doing, which has been almost exactly 10 years to the week, by the way. I find out now that it was in December of 2012 December of 2002 when I started writing Eject. And then all of a sudden things started working out for me. So it's never too late. But let's talk about this dropout business. The reason that me being a dropout had no effect on my career at all, and I mean no effect on my career, was because I was a dropout in the theater department. And if I had gone and gotten my BFA, my Bachelor of Fine Arts, in the theater department, that would have influenced my ability to get work in my chosen field by a factor of 0. Having that degree would have made essentially, in my opinion, zero difference. That was because I was in a talent-based industry, and the only thing that my credentials would have possibly helped me for in the theater, a BFA in theater, would have been useful to go to graduate school so I could defer the world for another couple years, and then I could have gotten the MFA, and the MFA would have been useful for teaching theater. That's it. Now, if you're an engineer, this strategy does not apply to you. Likewise, a doctor, likewise, an attorney. In fact, almost anything. But things like theater or that sort of play degree. And I'm not knocking people who have a theater degree. Most of my friends from that time, not my current friends, but my friends from that age, got theater degrees, MFAs, BFAs, beautiful, talented people. But they'd be almost as talented. They certainly could be as talented without the degree, because now we're getting down to brass tacks of the issue. I did 4 years of college on and off, I guess damn near 4 years, and I didn't get the degree, but I did get the education. I got the education. That's an important distinction. So a lot of people drop out because they goof off. I dropped out because my financial aid dried up. Dried up when Ronald Reagan was elected, and I blamed him for it because I was an idiot. I was a major idiot. But I passionately believed in things I didn't know anything about, as I've said many times. So when I was in college, I wasn't in college to drop out. I was in college to succeed, and then forces forced me out. Many dropouts drop out because they don't take it seriously. They just start goofing off and, whatever. So I dropped out, and I realized that this is a really great question because it makes me look at things in a way I've never really looked at them before, which is why I like questions like this. Here's the secret for me, Jennifer. I was very, 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 very fortunate because I got an educational launch, the likes of which I've yet to meet somebody who had the educational launch that I have. I've not run into anybody who had the kind of educational beginnings that I had. I was born in New York City. My dad moved the family to Bermuda when I was 3. So from kindergarten until about grade 7 or 8, I went to British private schools. Everybody went to private schools. They're called public schools, but you had to pay me. We wore uniforms. We sang God Save the Queen. We had the most amazingly rigorous, challenging, competitive schooling I've ever seen before or since. Just to give you an idea of what my life was like prior to coming back to the United States I did it briefly in 7th grade, then went back for 8th, and then came back for 9th. But so let's realistically say 9th grade. When I was in Bermuda in English schools, we took education so seriously. First of all, we wore uniforms. We wore uniforms so that we didn't have to get obsessed about what clothes to wear. And it wasn't a fashion show. You wore the same stuff every day. And the school has since changed, to my dismay, because it was Saltus Grammar School on the island of Bermuda, in Hamilton, Bermuda, Saltus Grammar School. I went to Warwick Academy, and then went to Saltus Grammar School, and they're both still there. I looked at Saltus's website a couple months ago, and I was very sad to see that a lot of things that I thought were so useful had changed. Two of the things that had changed, the uniforms are still there, but two of the things that had changed was they made it a co-ed school now. And when I was there, it was an all-boys school. Now, you will pay a high price for this. Believe me on this one. You will pay a high price for going to an all-boys school. You will become socially awkward, and if you were inclined to be socially awkward, you will become much more socially awkward. But you will get an education because there's none of that distraction at all. None. And the other thing that they changed was they completely loosened up the discipline. When I was in those schools, I've told this story, I guess, on TSL before. I'll abbreviate this version. If you were out of line, you would get caned. And the tolerance for out-of-line behavior was 0. And you were quite concerned about being hit with a cane. And the British assistant headmasters, the headmaster was a guy who would just sort of walk around. And by the way, the teachers, we all wore blazers with our school crest. We had our little enamel pin for our house, just like in Harry Potter. One of the brilliant things about the British school system was the British schools were divided up randomly. You just walked in, you were just randomly assigned to one of 4 houses, were what they were called. And that dates back from the earliest days of these kind of universities and schools where you would live in a house. You'd have one dorm, which would be one house of students, and another dorm, and another dorm, and another dorm. 4 houses. So we would have little enamel pins in the shape of a shield and with a certain color. And when I was in Warwick Academy, I think I was in Morgan House, and our color was yellow. And when I went to Saltus, I was in Saltus House, and our color was red. Neither liked red or yellow. I always liked blue, but never got to be in blue. Patterson was blue. And so what these houses would do would allow the school to allow the students in the school to compete against themselves all the time. And so we would get to school, and the first thing we would do is we would stand outside and we'd sing God Save the Queen, and they'd run up the Union Jack. Then we'd go inside into chapel, and we would sing hymns every day. Sang hymns for, I don't know, half an hour, 20 minutes, something like that. Sang a hymn, said some prayers. And of all the hymns that I sang, I don't remember very many of them, but I do remember the one about the song for those in peril on the sea, the sailor's hymn, I guess it is. Eternal Father, strong to save, Whose arm doth bind the restless wave. That's a beautiful thought, isn't it? Whose arm doth bind the restless wave. Who bids the mighty ocean deep its own appointed limits keep. Now hear us when we cry to thee, for those in peril on the sea. It's a profound hymn to sing if you live in an island and if you come from a culture that is a naval culture, a maritime culture like Great Britain was. And we sang that hymn, and I loved that hymn. And there was another one, Jerusalem was a beautiful hymn. And our school song was in Latin. And we had to sing it in Latin, and we had to be told what it means. I don't remember anything like the rest of our school song, but I can remember the first couple of bars of it in Latin. It was Gaudeamus igitur juvenes dom somas, Gaudeamus igitur juvenes dom somas, juventem juventutem meriatem senectutem cononasem. I haven't sung that in 45 years, but it's still in my head. And then what? But here's the real genius of British private schools. In British private schools, we would have a weekly schedule rather than a daily schedule. So what that meant was, if we go to school on Monday, we wouldn't call it Monday, we'd call it day one. Tomorrow's Thursday, it's going to be day three, because you often miss more days on a Monday or a Friday. That's just how it breaks out. And otherwise, you keep dropping Mondays from the schedule. So it's day one, day two, day three, day four, day five. Then the next school day would be day one. So on day one, which would occur every 5 school days, on day one, you would have, you'd get there at, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and you'd have double geography. You'd have 2 hours of geography. And you'd have a morning recess, and then you'd have, let's say, Spanish. Then you'd have lunch, and then you'd have double phys ed, then you'd have biology, and then you'd have math, and you go home. And then day 2, the morning would be double history, then English, then the break, and then metalwork, and then double art, and it would break. Very funny, Flint 350, his wine glass just cracked. My God, I've got the worst voice in the world. But what I'm basically saying there is, because we had a weekly schedule, we carried 11 subjects. I took 11 subjects from the time I was in first grade through the time I was in 8th, 9th grade. And by the time I was in junior high, I was taking, I'm not kidding now, I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I was taking physics, chemistry, biology, math, history, geography, wood shop, metal shop, physical education, Spanish, English, reading. I think that's it, 11 or 12 subjects. And sometimes we'd have a double hour of them. And teachers would read to us, and we'd read Invisible Man out loud, a page at a time. We'd sit in a big room, and we'd read The Invisible Man, and somebody would read 2 paragraphs, and they move on to the next guy, and we read War of the Worlds and Day of the Triffids, and that was great. It was fantastic. And so when you start out like that, oh, and here's the part that really meant so much to me, was the competition. We would, 4 times a year, once a quarter, they would have an assembly right after hymns in the morning, and we would get ranked. And instead of getting an A, a B, or a C on your test, you'd get if it was a 10-question test, you'd get 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 17 out of 20. And so 4 times a year, they would simply total up all the questions asked and total up all of your right answers. And 4 times a year, they would have an assembly, and they'd say, and now for Rhodes' house, or for Saltus' house. First, in grade 2B, Bill Whittle. And I ate it up. I loved it. I was very, very, very motivated. And I loved the teachers, too, because they all wore the gowns every day, tie, gowns. We all wore ties. They'd walk into the room. We'd all stand up. We'd stay standing until they sat down. Then they would say, be seated, and we'd sit down. And when they'd call on us, you had to say, start with a sir sandwich, start with a sir, end with a sir. But they would call us, master. Master Whittle, master this. Yeah, everybody got called master. Everybody loved it, except for poor Alvin Bates. He for some reason, had a really bad time of it. But we got treated with a lot of respect, and we treated them with a lot of respect. And I actually liked those people very, very, very much. And they didn't go easy on us, but they weren't crazy. And when you come to America, you hear people say, oh, well, this discipline about getting caned, you get out of line, you go up to the assistant headmasters, and you might get caned. How brutal this is on those delicate young minds. But I'm here to tell you something. I went from British schools in those levels of discipline. This is 1967, 1968, 69 levels of discipline. I went from that to the Dade County school system in Miami. And you want to talk about brutalizing delicate minds. When you have a system in school where discipline is strict and the rules are very clear, then it's clear to everybody that if you follow the rules, you're going to be just fine, and if you don't, you won't be. But when you come to Dade County school system and you realize that nobody cares what happens to you, nobody cares whether you get pushed around or bullied or any of that stuff, then you realize, no, this is terrifying. Because when I came from Bermuda, there was a significant Portuguese contingent in Bermuda, and I'm a quarter Portuguese myself. I discovered late in life, strangely enough. Didn't know my grandmother was Portuguese. And there was a large black contingent in Bermuda, and there was none of this racism, none of it, because there was never slavery in Bermuda. But when I got to Dade County, the white kids from Key Biscayne, I lived on Key Biscayne, were bussed into Ponce de Leon Junior High and Coral Gables Senior High. When I got to Dade County, we were sent into this three-way race war between whites, blacks, and Cubans. And we were the little lambs, man. I mean, you want to talk about just really fearing for your life every day. I mean, really, my junior high, I really was, not just me, I mean, a lot of us, we were really, really scared. And nobody did anything about it. So this business about, oh, no, we can't discipline these children because if we do, that'll hurt their little spirits. Didn't work out that way. So by the time I got to high school, I had such a head start. They put me a grade ahead, but I didn't like that socially. That was really bad for me. They put me back in the grade I was supposed to be in for my age. And I'll tell you the honest truth about what happened after that. I had enough of a head start, and I got so bored and I got so tired of being, given crap for having the answers and all this stuff that I just plain stopped. I just stopped. And I just didn't give a damn anymore. And right at that time when I was 13, came to Miami. I moved back and forth, so I know the dates are a little weird, but we were in Bermuda, back to Miami, back to Bermuda, back to Miami. But by and large, right around age 13, I went down and applied at the Miami Planetarium after I saw a star show in there, and I said, I got to work here. And to be perfectly honest with you, my junior and senior years of high school, in fact, my sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school, were spent at the Miami Planetarium. And I was spending it with guys who were 10 years older than me, and they were electrical engineers and astronomy professors. And I would just skip as much school as I possibly could skip. And they felt guilty about it, and they were doing the right thing. No, you can't be here. You got to go to school. But I think on some level, too, these guys like Phil Trick and Doug Gagan and Bill DeShong, they were all 10 years older than me, and they were the older brothers I never had. And they kept giving me lectures about how I've got to go to school and I can't stay here. But I think on some level they knew that I was actually much better off at the planetarium and I was learning a lot more than I would have been if I'd been in school. I remember very clearly when I got to 7th grade right out of Bermuda. I got to 7th grade right out of Bermuda, and I and a few other kids were so far ahead of the rest of the class. They had this independent study thing, and I got a little independent study card, and it was a picture of a profile, and it was up in the guy's head, profile, and there's a little infinity in his head, and then outside his head was another big infinity, and it was like the infinity coming through your eyes to form an infinity in your head. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card is what it was. And I, in 7th grade at Shenandoah and at Ponce de Leon in 8th grade, 8th and 9th, I had this card, and I would be in reading class, and we would sit down and do the reading assignment for the week. We'd start the reading assignment for the week, and I'd finish that in about 20 minutes. And then for the rest of that week, I just flashed my card and I went to the library and I started researching ion drives and photon drives and specific impulse and all the stuff I was going to need to know in order to get to Mars. And I see there Channel 78 mentions the immortal Jack Horkheimer. Jack Horkheimer, for those of you who don't know him, he was Star Hustler on PBS, and many of you still won't know what that means, but I started working for Jack Horkheimer when I was 13, and I worked for him directly until I was 30, with time off for college and stuff. Jack Horkheimer was the most insane individual I'd ever met, and I use that word very carefully. He was genuinely nuts. He was one of the most abusive people I've ever known, one of the most really brutal people to work for. Very, 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 very harsh and emotional and prone to outbursts and stuff, especially if you're a 13, 14, 15-year-old little kid who takes this stuff very, very seriously. And there were times when Jack Horkheimer had me literally banging my head against these solid oak doors in the planetarium as hard as I could, almost to the point where I knocked myself out. I was that frustrated and that upset and that angry. And he would come in sometimes and he'd get me so worked up I'd just start hyperventilating, which is not something I'm prone to do. And I say all that only to say this. Jack Horkheimer also, at the same time, coincidentally, meaning at the same time, was the most generous, brilliant, kind guy. That was Jack. He was such a contrast. Jack was the kind of guy who would chew out a 14 or 15-year-old boy to the point where he just had to go away and cry. And then the next thing you know, he'd invite you to his house and you'd spend the night there, sitting around with the adults and talking politics and talking, all of this stuff. Jack Horkheimer got a lot of work out of me, but Jack Horkheimer made me a console operator when I was 13 years old. He had me running planetary shows when I was 13. I've told this story before. I'll tell it quickly. I just love it. I got there. This is just a good advice for youngsters out there. If you have any kids watching this and you think, my God, look at Bill Whittle, what a magnificent specimen of a man. How did he ever get this far? Got this far because despite the fact that he dropped out of college, and I need to get back to that. It's funny how we get lost. But when I was 13, I saw a planetarium show with my high school group. I came back that weekend and said, I'll do anything to work here. And they said, well, we don't have any jobs for you. I said, it's okay. I'll just be an usher. So I came back and took tickets, and we can't pay you. I said, you don't have to pay me. Swept up the floor, took tickets, showed people to their seats, cleaned up the vomit. And I did that for about a month on weekends. And then they started paying me $2.15 an hour to do it. And then I did that for another 2, 3, 4 months. And there was a show called Long Journey of a Young God, which was about the Apollo program. And Jack Horkheimer was a genius. He wrote brilliant shows. Child of the Universe, Long Journey of a Young God, brilliant. Everything I learned from Jack Horkheimer. Certainly everything I learned about writing and showmanship. And one night, I was in there, and I was either 13 or just turned 14, and Jack said, we want to remount Long Journey of a Young God. I've got a friend visiting from another planetarium, and I want to show it to him. And the guy who was on duty said, well, I'm sorry, Jack, I got to go. I got a date. And the other guy said, I can't stay late or anything. And Jack said, oh, man, I really wanted to show this to this guy. And I'm this skinny 13-year-old kid. And I said, I can do it. And he said, no, we can't mess around. I mean, I really want this guy to see it right. I don't want to, practice it. I said, no, I can do it. How can you do it? And I said, I'd stay late and come in early, and I'd practice. I always wanted to do it. I've done it 50 times on my own. You kidding? I said, no, I'm serious. I just wanted to be good at it because it was all manual. It was like playing a piano. You just had to be everywhere and manually bring all the stuff up, move the star projector, fly the planets around, bring up the slides, advance the slides. It's like conducting a symphony, and you're running off a paper script with just written cues on a backlit piece of red plastic. And I convinced him that I could do it, and he said, okay. So I put the slide projectors, climbed up there behind the dome and mounted the old trays and got everything queued up and put on the old tapes, stuck it on the reel-to-reel player, got everything queued up. He brought his friend in. I took the lights down. I hit the play button, and along comes that launch sequence at the beginning, and I flew through that thing. And there was one very, 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 very complex thing, the most complex thing he's ever written. It was like the, the toughest piece of piano playing ever written. It was one of those. So I got through that. I made one mistake, fairly minor mistake. And the lights came up at the end, and I didn't say a word, and Jack didn't say a word. And the guy got up and said, Jack, that's a fantastic show. Really, really loved it. Jack says, I'll meet you right outside. We'll take you out to dinner. The guy goes walking out the front of the room, and I'm just standing behind the console. And Jack Horkheimer turned around to me, and he said, you're going to start doing this starting tomorrow. You're a console operator now. That was just terrific. That was terrific. And it just goes to show you, you can, in fact, work your way up from nothing if you have the right attitude. And my attitude was not only I'm going to come here because I want to work here and they don't have to pay me, but my attitude was also I'm not just going to stand here. If I've been given this opportunity to, take tickets or to stand in the back and watch this stuff, then I'm going to watch it. I'm going to learn how to do it, and I'm going to come in early, and I'm going to stay late, and I'm going to practice on my own time because I love it. Because I love it. It's not because somebody made me do it. It's not because I have to advance my career. I just loved it. And they gave me an opportunity. They put $1 million facility in the hands of a 13-year-old kid, gave him the keys because I had to have the keys to let people in. And since I had the keys, I'd come in early and stay late, and I would fly through the starts, and I learned. And the other part of the story for you younger people out there is not only is it good to work hard and expect no reward and hope that'll come someday, and not only is it important to be alert and be ready and practice and learn and have the discipline and the structure and all that other stuff. The final part of this story is you got to know when your moment comes, and if your moment comes and there's something or you think you can do it, but you're not sure but you think you can, you better jump on it. You'd better jump on it. That's right. Somebody up there just said, "Who dares wins." Amendment X. That's right. The SAS Special Air Service motto is "Who dares wins." You've got opportunity will come to anybody in this country, and the key to opportunity is you've got to be ready for it when it comes. You have no control over when the opportunity comes, but you have 100% control over being ready for the opportunity, and that means what do you want to do? Figure out what you want to do. Go put yourself in that environment. Learn everything you can before you go in there. Learn everything you can while you're there. And do more than you're expected to do. And just be ready because the time will come. And when that time comes, you can't be shy and you can't hesitate. You've got to leap. And if somebody says, "Are you sure?" You've got to say, "Yes, I'm sure." I don't know if it was Andrew Carnegie got started that way. I think it was Andrew Carnegie who became one of the second richest man in the history of the world at the time. And I think he came penniless from Scotland and was working in a railroad office as a secretary to the guy who did all of the scheduling. And it turns out there was some catastrophe on the rails and some track had been completely abused and they couldn't get any more traffic around it. And Carnegie, who was 17 or something, literally here from Scotland, 5-6 months studying this job, couldn't reach the guy who made the decision. So Carnegie started giving orders to entire locomotive trains, to people who'd been in the business for 40 years. They didn't know it was him. It was coming by the telegraph. And I think I'm virtually sure it was Carnegie. Carnegie just started to divert this train back up 6 miles and take this track and then go around and come back up here. And Carnegie basically kept the trains running that day. And when the boss came in and found out that the 16 or 17-year-old had directed the nation's rail traffic without permission, Carnegie could have had his butt hanging from a tree, but turns out that Carnegie made the right decision. So Carnegie was instantly promoted. And I don't mean promoted a grade. Carnegie was suddenly placed. Carnegie gained 20 years in an afternoon. His career was advanced 20 years in an afternoon because he saw an incredible opportunity. He was prepared for it. See, he wasn't bluffing. That's the important part about this story, and to a much lesser degree to my story. I didn't say, "Yeah, I can do it," when I really couldn't. I didn't say, "Yeah, I could do it," and bluff. I could do it. I spent my own time. Carnegie spent his time. He watched. He was fascinated by this stuff. So next thing you know, 20 years, 30 years advancement happened like that. So anyway, Jennifer, back to your question about being a dropout. The reason that I had a very, very, very strong pre-American education. Dade County school system didn't do me much good. I got in there with a 4.0 average. I graduated Coral Gables High School with a 2.6 average. I got to college. I did much, much better because in college I was challenged again. And I remember very clearly going to kind of a social studies class called The Two Cultures, and the professor would do a lecture, and I was fascinated by it. And then after that, he'd say, "Yeah, if anybody's interested, we're going to go across the street, get a beer." And I was old enough to drink beer, and I thought, man, this is awesome. We'd go across the street and drink beer and talk about this stuff, and that's what college is supposed to be, right? Challenging and inviting and stuff. I still have my term papers from The Two Cultures. I wrote a term paper. It's still on my desk, and it's was 200 points for the final, and the guy gave me 199 plus. He wrote 199 plus. He says I don't give out perfect scores. And, you got a right to be proud about something like that because you put everything you have into it, and that's the key to life. So the dropping out didn't happen because I wasn't paying attention. Dropped out because of circumstances. I couldn't afford it. I just couldn't pay for it. So I dropped out, and I dropped out and just kept reading. I'd always been interested in history and military history, and then I just read everything. I read all the time, and then I don't really know what I learned during those intermediate years or how I learned, but I did. I mean, I dropped out in '82. I got a job in a nightclub in Miami. I was doing the lights and the lasers down there and started getting the hang of this social thing, and my first taste of kind of being up on a stage and, kind of being, hot shot in the nightclub. And I just got jobs in production and show business, but I kept reading all sorts of different things and read a lot of magazines. And then all of a sudden the internet happens, and I just have had a very good memory. I've always had a really selective memory. There's a lot of things I don't remember, but my memory is such that when I see something interesting, I have a way to just kind of grab it and lock it down. People have asked me how I do what I do, how I sometimes make these connections, which is probably more obvious in the essays or certainly like in the firewalls or the afterburners, or how I can sometimes answer these virtual presidency questions fairly easily. It's because I stand every day. I read 5-6 hours a day on the internet, I would say. And I think the best description I could ever come up with what I do is I feel like I'm Dorothy in the tornado. I'm standing there on the porch, and I'm watching just all of this information swirling around so fast, no way to keep track of it. Many, many, many times I've quoted people or used an argument or something, and I pray I could find a way to attribute it to the person who came up with it, but the information is moving so fast I can't remember. It was 4 clicks ago. But what happens is, as this tornado of information floats around, I go, oh, look, there's a cow. Oh, there's a barn. There's a woman on a broomstick. And I remember these things, and I stick them away, and then I use them. And the great thing about the internet, the amazing thing about the internet is I will have some fragment of a memory from 30 years ago. I remember Lincoln said something about, Lincoln said that if I'm going to govern my administration in such a way so that at the end of it, even if there's only one friend it has left in the world, that friend will be the friend inside me. And I'll remember that part of it. And then I'll go to Google and I'll go type in Abraham Lincoln, the friend inside me. And bam, there it is. The full quote in all its glory, where he said it, when he said it. And that's the miracle of the internet, is that you can actually become, the term is an autodidact. You can teach yourself everything. And the internet, by the way, often had this thought. I've never figured out exactly how to do it. I was going to do a series of 5 or 6 commentaries called the World of Tomorrow. And I was going to do it in front of like a 1959 bank of old computers, and I'd wear a white lab coat, and we'd shoot it like it was on black and white TV with all the scan lines. And it would be like one of these 1958, 59 science kind of things. And I was going to do a bunch of them. And the point was I was going to say, in the world of tomorrow, we'll do this, 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 and this. And then we'd realize just how far short of the world of tomorrow we've actually come. But the miracle of the internet is, and the curse of the internet is, the internet disproves the Democrat and the liberal theory of mankind, because the liberal theory of mankind is if we give people who aren't working money and help, they'll use that time to better themselves and get themselves an education. We want to help them get an education, so we're going to send them money. And then they'll be able to get their education. But the fact of the matter is there's virtually anybody in America can afford a computer today, some kind of computer. They're $200-$300. And virtually anybody can afford some kind of internet connection or can go to the library, but I'm talking about a home computer now. And the real reason the internet proves that liberals are incorrect about their theory of people is that the internet is used for porno and gaming, when in point of fact, any single person out there, the poorest person out there, can come home, take Spanish or Chinese. If you're a janitor and you're a janitor who speaks English and Spanish, you'll get paid more money because you're more valuable, because you're rarer. Listen carefully, kids. The secret to making money in the world is being scarce, being able to do things other people can't do. If you're a janitor who speaks English and Chinese, you can make considerably more money because that's even rarer. But there's not a person in the world now who can, at least in America, who can afford a computer, who cannot get themselves not only an education, but actual, an honest-to-God degree in things like mechanical. You can learn how to be a mechanic. You can learn how to be an electrician. I'm not talking about electrical engineering, but you can learn that online too. You can better your education. You can take 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade English, math. You can do all these things. You can get all of this stuff online for free. And Apple University alone is worth hundreds of PhDs if you were to just suck that free information out. And the fact that people don't do it is an indication that their theory of people is wrong. If you give people who aren't working money, they won't use it to get an education. They'll use it to sit around and watch TV and internet porn and play games. I don't blame them. I spent a fair amount of my life doing those things myself. But finally comes a point where your curiosity gets the stronger of you and you become an autodidact. You learn how to do these things. So the final thing I'll say, Jennifer, is this. This final question you have here is, do you have any words of advice for breaking into the punditry world without traditional credentials? Traditional credentials are virtually useless to you in the punditry world. Punditry, which, by the way, is the singular last occupation I would ever in my wildest dreams have imagined myself being. I utterly, utterly, utterly could not have seen this coming. Ever, 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 ever. But punditry essentially is another word for expertise. People, to the degree that people are interested in what I have to say, they're interested in what I have to say because of two different parts of the equation. The first part of the equation is I have to know what I'm talking about. The second part of the equation is I have to put what I'm talking about in a way that people find entertaining. And if you're interested in a career in punditry, you're going to need to know how to do both of those things. You're going to have to know how to speak about something with authority, and it has to be something you know, because if people are coming to read what you think about something, that's really all it is, right? Hey, Bill, what do you think about this? What do you think about election fraud? Well, who cares what I think about it? To the degree that anybody cares what I have to say about something, it's presumably because I have an insight into it, and the insight is a reflection of the fact that I study this stuff. Pundits really are people who give you their opinion so that you don't have to go to all of the work to get an informed opinion yourself. That's really ultimately what it comes down to, right? You go to an expert. The guy tells you this, and you say, I'll take your word for it because I don't want to spend 15 years to get to the same point where I would have agreed with you anyway. So you have to know what you're talking about. And so, Jennifer, that means that if you're going to talk about politics, politics is such a gigantic, wide word. I would never, ever, ever think that you'd have a chance to know anything about politics and be a political pundit. If you want to talk about how the military influences politics, that's interesting. If you want to talk about politics and the internet, if you want to find an area that you're good at is what I'm trying to say. Do not just be opining about same things that everybody else is opining about. Just find what you're good at and be a pundit about that. What do you know? There's room for pundits. There's an example I love to use because I find it very different from any of the hobbies I'm interested in, but I think it's an interesting hobby. If you make duck decoys, if you carve ducks out of wood and then paint them to look photorealistic, then be a pundit about that, because that's something that you know, and that's something other people will come to you for information about. And I think a guy who blogs about duck decoys has a much better chance of being a success than a guy who wants to give you his opinion about politics but has nothing particularly useful to say. You'll probably find a way to work duck decoys into political things, and then your big success will come when you explain why Barack Obama is like a duck decoy. And that essay will get you some attention. And the ultimate thing about the internet, the beautiful thing about the internet is that as far as punditry or anything else goes now, movies the same way, music, everything. The beautiful thing about the internet is the entry cost is darn near zero. If it's not zero, it's close enough to zero to be zero. And when I started in 2002, I was one of 4 million blogs that started in 2002. So how did I get to be sitting here talking to you guys today when 4 million other people didn't? Well, it's talent. It's. I hate to be that obnoxious about it, but you've got to write or speak in such a way that people find you interesting, because if you're not interesting, they don't want to come back to you. So you can be a pundit by dropping out. You absolutely can. You do not need credentials to be a pundit. Nobody listens to Charles Krauthammer because he's the senior fellow this or the PhD in that or no, people listen to Charles Krauthammer because he's a smart guy, knows what he's talking about, says it in a way that's informative, and wouldn't exactly call it lighthearted or amusing, but that's the power of Charles Krauthammer, just as an example. He doesn't necessarily have to be amusing. He's the hammer. When he says something, it's probably true. So that's my advice to you. We didn't get through all of them. We'll do one more here, I think. Good question. Kat Wilson says, hey, Bill, my high school junior daughter, say hi to Noelle. She really admires you. Hi, Noelle. I admire you, too. Anybody who watches a show like this at a junior in high school is somebody who's not flying with the rest of the birds in the flock, and that's probably going to pay dividends for you downstream. So, hi. Is preparing for college and looking first at in-state schools, also wants to go to biochem. Yay, real job opportunity, says Kat. That's absolutely right. Biochem is something you'll be working and getting paid for the rest of your life. Do it. Do not drop out of biochem. Do not drop out of biochem. You will not have the same success as a biochem dropout in biochem as I had as a theater dropout in theater. However, with that said, she would like very much to know what it was that persuaded you to come over here to the dark side with us. Was it because we make better cookies? I've already had an offer of cookies earlier this evening, so this actually works out rather well. What persuaded me to come over to the dark side was that I was never, the dark side meaning conservatism. What persuaded me to come to the dark side was not that I had to be persuaded. This is a tough thing to explain, which is why I really like this question. Because I was much, much, much more liberal. You look at my voting record, I was a liberal. I mean, I'm horribly, horribly embarrassed to admit it. I'm more ashamed of this than just about anything except for what's on my iPod. But the fact of the matter is, I've said it before, I might as well say it again. I don't have any secrets with you people. My first vote was for Walter Mondale because he said he'd raise taxes. I didn't vote for Dukakis because some people have their limits. In 92, I was kind of liking George Bush, and I like Ross Perot. I was going to vote for Perot because he sounded different. And then Perot dropped out. Then he got back in. I said, screw you, Ross Perot. I'm going to vote for this Clinton guy because he's not checking his watch during the debate. Looks like he's got some interesting new ideas. So I voted for Clinton in 92, voted for Clinton in 96. In 2000, I liked John McCain very much, and I liked Bill Bradley very much, and I figured as long as it's one of these two guys will be okay. Came down to Gore and Bush, and I voted for Al Gore, even though by then I considered myself a conservative. Why did I vote for Al Gore in 2000 when I considered myself a conservative? Because even then, my belief system was not a belief system. It was a skin. It was something that I put on like a cloak, like a jacket. I used to wear thin lapels, then I wear wide lapels, and I wear thin lapels again. I was a liberal, and I'm a conservative. And the point I'm trying to make is that I was a liberal because I didn't understand anything. And it wasn't that I didn't understand it because I was stupid, and it wasn't even that I ran away from it. It wasn't even that I didn't want to understand. It just wasn't important. Isn't that the great thing about America? Isn't that really how America should be? That politics should be so basically, politics shouldn't run your life. The president being elected or not elected shouldn't be the cause for people to get out on the edge of a bridge. It should be something that happens a long way away and occupies a small little sliver of your life. And that's what started me getting into politics, was as it got bigger and bigger. But needless to say, 9/11 got my attention. And I didn't start writing after 9/11, but I started reading a lot after 9/11. But up in between the years when I was in college, when I was at my most liberal, was when I was in college, surrounded by other theater department people who also knew nothing about what's going on. I still see them on Facebook, and they still know nothing. I've come a lot further than they have. They have the same opinions I used to have. I have different opinions now because I know an awful lot more about this than they do, which is why I'm convinced this is right. I simply started paying attention. And I was not, this is the thing, this is a point I've been trying to make. I was never a liberal in my bones. When people said, you used to be a liberal, now you're conservative. I never was really a liberal because I never understood liberalism. I never understood it. It's not like, here's a conservative argument, here's a liberal argument. I'm going with the liberal argument. This makes much more sense to me. I didn't hear any other argument. I just basically agreed what other people agreed with. And that's why we have got so much work to do with winning elections, and that's why winning elections will be so fundamentally easy for us. Because once you make the case for these two stories, there's no competition whatsoever. We're going to destroy these people if we can start playing in the culture. But I didn't give a damn about politics. I still think politics is the most low-life form of making a living in the world. I can't believe the disgrace of making a living as a political pundit. It's only better than not working at all. But I certainly do like it. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't like it. But when I say I voted for those people, I only voted for them because I looked at Bill Clinton. He seemed like a nice guy. The reason I voted for Al Gore, very simple. Very simple. The reason I voted for Al Gore over George Bush, even though I was known as the staff Republican at the time, was because I remember George Bush talking about the death penalty, which I'm in favor of, and him saying, well, we just kill him. And I thought, that seems a little cold-hearted to me. Yeah, the other guy seems nicer. See how, I bet you it's 30-40% of the population easily votes like this. It's only when I started thinking about these things that I'd always believed started making sense. Now, life does turn you conservative, which is why the liberals are determined that people will never grow up. One of the reasons they're in favor of this perpetual adolescence is because as you come out of adolescence and face the real world, 9 out of 10 people become conservatives because world will do that to you. I can clearly remember in college thinking that if, I'll just put it as plainly as I can, I remember thinking and saying in college that if a black guy comes through my window and steals my TV set, that's okay, because I'm a white child of privilege and I can always go out and get a TV set. I'm well educated and I'm well connected. But this guy, this may be his only opportunity to have a TV set. So, it's just a fact of life I'm just going to have to accept. Then a guy actually did come through my window 6 inches away from where I was sleeping. And I woke up and I said, what are you doing here? And he ran away. And that's when I started thinking about this. And I realized, wait a minute now. Is this guy really unable to have a TV set in America? Is that really what it is? Is this guy breaking into my room and potentially knifing me to death to get the TV set? That wasn't even my TV set, by the way. My dad paid for that TV set. So is he going to take that TV set? The real question, honestly, was, is he going to take that TV set and sell it so that he can get a crust of bread for his family and bring milk home to his little baby daughter because they're all starving to death? Or is he going to take that TV set down to a pawn shop and pawn it for a couple hits of crack? It's B. It's always B. Always B. It's in this country. There are places in the world where people are starving to death. There are places in the world where you have to steal to eat, and this is not one of those places. And that realization sank in. It sank in that these guys would probably kill me if I challenged them. And if you wake up in the middle of the night, if you're asleep and you wake up and there's somebody standing in your room, and this guy was in the window. I mean, his upper torso was inside my bedroom, and he was 2 feet away from me. I reach out and touch him in the ear. And I realized, if I scare this guy enough and he's coming into my room, he's probably coming into my room with some kind of weapon. And if I just wake up in a start and scream or yell or whatever, and say, hey, what's going on? There's a chance this guy could kill me over a TV set that he doesn't need for his family, that he's just going to do so he can disappear for 8 hours or 12 or 24, however long he's gone from the reality that he's in. And these kind of questions will start getting you thinking about things. And when you start thinking about these things, then you start to realize that all of the stuff that you believe when you're young is not true. The great reason that the reason that so many young people are liberals, and the reason that lifelong liberals in their 80s, are emotionally arrested in adolescence or earlier, is because it is a very, very, very ego-seductive thought to think that you're the first person to think of this, and also to think that you're so much better than the people who have come before you. That is a powerful drug. And that's what powers liberalism, is the belief that you're smarter and better than other people. It's evidenced in the fact that I'm smarter than other people because I can see these socioeconomic pressures that force this poor man to come into people's windows and steal their television sets. And I'm morally better than everybody else because I'm able to see that this is the only chance this poor fellow has, and I can have all the TV sets I want, but he's only going to get this one chance at the one, so I'm going to be able to rise above this kind of level of, animal sort of selfishness that people with firearms use to protect their families and their lives against these predators and this kind of thing. And I think you really get to the place where ultimately the people who the world reality does make you more conservative. It's been said by much better, smarter people than me. It was Churchill who said, if you're not I don't even remember it. If you're not an optimist at 30, there's something wrong with your heart, and if you're not a pessimist at 40, there's something wrong with your head. Something along those lines. But the only reason people don't become conservative as they get older is because they are so addicted to the sense of achievement, and it's unearned achievement. It's unearned moral superiority, unearned intellectual superiority. I'm better than other people because I'm going to allow this guy to come into my room and maybe rape my wife or kill my children and take the TV set because I see things on a social level that no one else does. It's a bunch of nonsense. And by the way, they believe that right up until the point where somebody does murder their children or rape their wives, and then all of a sudden they change their tune. I didn't have to get that far done. But the reason I came over to the dark side was because the dark side makes sense. And as a person in my line of work, I have to defend these ideas. I not only promote them, and I'm as effective as I might be promoting them because I want to be effective at promoting them, because they're good ideas, and they're good ideas because they're tested every day. And many of these things are not obvious. It seems obvious that if somebody's poor and out of work, if you give them money, they'll better themselves, because that's what you would do. And they'll better themselves, they'll get an education, and instead of being a homeless person that's breaking into people's windows for their TV sets, they go on to become engineers and doctors. Only it's not true. That's not what happens when you give them money. You say, that's what I would do if they gave me money, but that's not true either, because I've lived on other people's generosity, and I did not use that time to better myself. Everybody's built this way. Free food is free food, and people will take free food, and the more free food there is, the more they'll take, and the more they'll resent the fact that they weren't getting free Cheetos with the free sandwiches. So, if you're willing to have your eyes open, you'll see this. Now, I think the final thing I'll close on tonight is I think that liberals won't see this, because I think on some level, I found this to be true many, many, many times. Liberals, one of two things happen to them. Either they don't go ahead and do anything in real world that they become proud of. In other words, they're able to maintain, they're desperate to maintain their sense of unearned moral and intellectual superiority, because they never do anything of value in the world. They go on and teach Renaissance poetry, and that savage down the street who owns the car dealership's worth $34 million, and I'm making $18,000 a year, and how dare he? I'm so much smarter than he is. He's an idiot. I'm morally advanced. So it becomes a psychological survival mechanism. So it's either because liberals don't do anything of any achievement in the real world that they can be proud of, so their entire identity of pride becomes this unearned moral or intellectual superiority, or they do things that that they should be proud of, but they aren't because they're guilty. And now you get into the limousine liberal. You get into guys like, let's just pick Barbara Streisand, for example, who champions all these liberal causes and talks about higher tax rates but doesn't pay them, and talks about the evils of capitalism as they collect $20 million checks. And they understand that they are being asked to sit in a trailer, a luxury trailer, and have servants, armies of servants, feed them everything. They're making $12 million for 4 weeks' work, while the people outside who are grips are barely able to pay their rent. You want to talk about income inequality? There is no income inequality anywhere greater than there is on a movie set. And on some subconscious level, they understand this. And so while they have achievements, they're ashamed of their achievements, and it's that shame and that guilt that drives them to wrap themselves in this cloak of unearned moral superiority, and that's why they continue to have their entire identity wrapped up in it. And that's why the easiest way to defeat liberals, and this will be my closing statement for the night because I got to run, I think the easiest way to defeat liberals when they ask you a question about policy is you have to know enough about the answers to be able to come up with a good rebuttal, common sense, workable rebuttal. But the one thing I learned from Andrew Breitbart is you never give them the moral high ground. That's where they start from. That's their initial position. Never, ever, ever give it to them. Once you understand that their entire ability to exist is dependent on them standing on ground above you, if you don't give them that high ground, they're done. They are done. They don't know what to do. I was doing an event at Oberlin College, and some 17, 18-year-old blonde white kid was telling me that he was in favor of affirmative action and that I must be a racist because I oppose it. And I said, who's the racist here? You're the person who believes that black people are stupider than white people because you're the person who's ready to let them get into college on a 650 when white kids need an 800. I don't believe that for a second. Not for an instant do I believe that black people are stupider than white people. I'd be all about volunteer programs like the United Negro College Fund to get disadvantaged kids enough money to go to school, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about a program that lets them in with lower test scores because you, on some fundamental level, believe that black people are inferior to whites and that they need the protection of white kids like you to speak up for them and get them into lower test scores and lower the bar for them, and that's your civic duty to these poor disadvantaged people. We do not see people the way you do. We're not racist like you are. You are a racist, and you know it's true. You know it's true. You just don't want to admit it. And the kid doesn't know what to say then. He doesn't know what to say. He's expecting me to say something else, and I call him out. I call out the global warming people. And this is the great thing about me is I have closing thoughts that last about 45 minutes. But I was listening to the BBC on my satellite radio, and I usually don't do that, but I heard this voice, and it was the voice, you've heard this voice a million times, the voice of a BBC woman reporter, and it's filled with that dripping condescension, that over-enunciation of their education, which was given to them at Oxford University, and this attitude that just reeks of superiority that hasn't been earned by anything. And I listened to her talk to the attorney for the U.S. military, and she was talking about drone strikes and talking about how, among the countless examples, Mr. So-and-so, let's just take the example of May 19th, 2011, where a drone strike struck a high-value target terrorist and killed nine innocent civilians standing around him. I suppose your position will be that this is legally and morally defensible on the part of the United States. And, of course, the attorney for the American armed forces did what attorneys do. He did the hat and cane shuffle, and he started backing up and started doing the tap dance, and the tap dance sounds like this. Well, first of all, it's the policy of the United States never to target innocent civilians. And any time that a civilian is killed in one of our raids, it is deeply, deeply regrettable. We go to great lengths to make sure that innocent civilians are not targeted. And we'd also like to state that we feel a tremendous amount of remorse, and we do everything in our power not to target civilians, and we blah blah blah. And we don't know whether they were civilians or this or that or so on or so forth, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. Apology, 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 apology. Basically saying, gee, I feel really bad. This is essentially what the guy said. We feel really bad when we kill civilians. We don't mean to do it, and gee, we're really sorry. And I was listening to this because I'm practicing for this virtual presidency thing. And you got to be ready on all fronts. And I was listening to this in real time, and I thought, how would I respond to this woman? And it came to me like a lightning bolt. Mr. Virtual President Whittle, what do you feel about these innocent civilians that have been massacred by the U.S. Army as a result of these drone strikes? Are you trying to say that this is a morally defensible position on the part of the U.S. government? And my response would be to look right at that woman. I would look her right in the eye. I would say, let me get something crystal clear with you, young lady. You are the most disgraceful, disgusting, repellent, abhorrent people on the face of the earth. You and people like you. Because people like you are fully, unlike the rest of the people out there, you are a well-educated, well-informed person, and you are fully aware of the kind of people that we are fighting against, the kind of people that you're defending here. You are fully aware of the fact that if we lose and they win, you will spend the rest of your life, best case scenario, in a fabric sack with a little grill for you to look out from the basement because you're not going to be allowed outside on yourself. That's the best case scenario for you if you get your way. The best case scenario for you if you get your way is to live in a burqa, to never be allowed outside except in the company of a male relative, to have acid thrown on your face if you decide to marry somebody or kiss somebody that's not approved of by your father, to have clitorectomies performed on you and all this other stuff. Your most likely outcome if these people win is that you'll be gang raped and then murdered and your head sewn off. And as your head is being sawn off by these 7th century barbarian savages, you will not be appealing to help from the U.S. military. You will spend your final gasps between choking down your own blood, telling these people that you're on their side, You're a good one. You're one of them. You're one of their friends. They don't care a damn. You are an infidel female, and you will be used and then executed because you deserve it. Now, starting from that premise, it takes a lot of nerve for you to sit there in the lap of luxury which is provided to you by capitalism, which you also condemn. You live a lovely life. You travel around in jet aircraft, and you have electric hair blow dryers, and you watch flat screen colors TV. All of this stuff provided to you by the miracles of capitalism, which you condemn, in a world of perfect safety and security provided by the U.S. and British armed forces that are out there dying for you every single day. And you have dedicated your life to destroying the people that are defending you from these animals, and you want to stand there and take a position of moral authority, moral superiority over people like us who are being forced to kill children, and you have the unmitigated gall, you who don't have any children, by the way, to tell those of us who do have children that we're monsters for doing this, that we have to make the tough decisions in the real world to suppress this horror and this nightmare and this ongoing tide of barbarism and hatred and savagery. Those of us that have to make the tough decisions to fight these people and have to put this on our consciousness, our consciences, and live with this every single moment of every single day. You have the unmitigated unmitigated gall to stand there and take a position of moral superiority over us. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. If you really believed what you claim you believe, you should go and get a job with the Taliban and fight this great evil in the West, because you benefit from every single thing that these drone strikes do and every single thing that capitalism provides you. You benefit from it and you try to destroy it. And let me close by saying this, young lady. If civilization does fall from the sky and we look down on the ruins of poetry and music and philosophy and all these other things, if homosexuals are executed in the middle of town squares by being hung from construction cranes, and there is no more medicine and there is no more anything, no more electricity, no nothing, because the people you're defending win, then the gravestone of civilization will have 3 letters on it, and those 3 letters will be B, B, C, and we will be able to deduce what happened after that. All of it will make perfect sense. We'll just look down and say BBC, got it. A bunch of elitist, undereducated, immoral swine have taken a position of moral superiority to assuage their own sense of guilt and their own sense of lack of ability, and climbed up on a mountaintop and thrown stones at the people that are defending them. You have got a lot of nerve asking me that question. Next question, please. That's what it sounds like, miserable lowlife. All of them in the press are this way. All of them. They're all this way. They're all exactly this way. You're better than us? Why? Because we kill terrorists and innocent civilians get killed? Well, you obviously don't care about innocent civilians. Don't tell us what we care or don't care about. We're better people than you. We're better people than you. We feel these things more than you do. Believe us. We have to know the difference between right and wrong, and we know that doing right sometimes comes with consequences, and these consequences are not anything that these people will ever get over. I assure you that I was offered the job, by the way, a couple times, offered the job of running drone missions out of Palmdale for General Atomics with the Predators. I had a friend who worked for the company. I had instrument rating, and I could have gotten my commercial pilot's license in about a week. They said, go do it. And I thought about it. I really did. I thought that'd be fun, because I wouldn't have any problems whatsoever pulling the trigger on these people. I know what they are. But I just, I realized if you're one of these guys and you're flying a drone mission from Nevada, and you don't make the decision as the pilot, but you pull that trigger. And the people who make the decisions make the decision. You later find out that 4 children were killed in that. You will never be the same person again, ever. You will never, ever, ever be the same person again. You live with that for the rest of your life. And by doing that, you have kept these people from exploding airliners with people like BBC reporters on them over the Atlantic at 2 o'clock in the morning on a cold night in December, when these savages had plans to blow up 10 airliners simultaneously. You have saved the life of that woman or women like her, men, women like her, little children who are sleeping on airplanes at 2 o'clock in the morning at 36,000 feet as those engines drone on and on and on between London and New York City, are going to come home and they're going to land and they're going to have Christmas and they're going to wake up and open their presents because some guy somewhere pulled a trigger on a car that had the guy who had the plans to blow up those airliners. And now he has to live with the fact that he killed some kids for the rest of his life. But you don't have to worry about that, do you? You just get your children, you go on, you live your life, and you talk about how evil we all are. Well, there are things about the world that are not in plain sight to everybody, but that doesn't mean they're not there, and it doesn't mean it can't be explained. Okay? When we know for an absolute certain moral fact that these savages and animals have absolutely, repeatedly planned to do these things, then it does become a question of who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? We didn't randomly fly over Afghanistan, madam. Didn't just randomly fly over Afghanistan and say, look, there's a group of unarmed civilians. Let's go blow them up. Because if we were the people that you claim we were, if we were the Nazis that you claim we were, we wouldn't be dicking around with drones like this. If we saw somebody down there in a city and we were the kind of people that you think we are, we would do what the people who you think we are actually did. When the Germans detected resistance in a village, they went in and murdered everybody and they burned the village to the ground. If we were the people you say that we are, we wouldn't launch a drone strike and try and hit a car with one guy in it and maybe accidentally kill 2 or 3 people who were standing nearby. We would send B-52s over, and we wouldn't just take out that building, we wouldn't just take out the block, we'd just flatten the city as an example to the others. Here's what happens when you house terrorists, we would say, and the terrorism threat would go away. And then we would be the people you accuse us of being, but we're not those people. Anybody with a brain knows it. And we are not going to sit here and continue to be battered by the likes of you. When you give up the benefits of capitalism, and when you walk out into the third world wilderness and you forego the security that is paid for by better men and women than you, and they're all better than you, and by a wide margin, then, After 3 or 4 years out there, then I will begin to listen to your moral lectures about your moral superiority. Until then, you're an absolute worthless waste of intellect and life and opportunity, and you should be ashamed of yourself. That's how you deal with reporters, in my humble opinion, and this is why we lose elections. This is why conservatives don't come out and vote. This is why 30 million of us decided to sit this one out, because they didn't hear anything different from Mitt Romney than they get from Barack Obama. But there's a difference between the two of us, and the difference is that Barack Obama does not like the society. He does not admire the society. He doesn't understand the society. He loathes the society. He believes that everything that the West has got, especially America, was a result of theft, and he is determined to make sure that we pay for that theft. I, on the other hand, have seen people run businesses from the ground up. I've watched people go from drinking powdered milk to driving around in brand new Mercedes SUVs to houses that cost $12, $13 million, because I watched them work every single moment of their lives. So I know how this works. He did build that business. He did it by himself. He had people working for them, and he paid them. And he not only paid them, he gave them a share in the company. I don't want to go on about this anymore. You get the general idea. But that's how you deal with them. You simply do not give them the moral high ground, because their entire strategy is predicated on it, and I'm not going to let them win anymore. I'm sick and tired of watching these people win. That's it for the Stratosphere Lounge number 21. Went a little longer than I thought. I've got to catch up on some things. I should have been out here at 7:30, but I always do get carried away sometimes. And I guess it's what we're paying for ultimately. And as always, just like to close the way I always do, thank you very much for your ongoing support. Thank you very much for watching. I have to say this every time because I feel so guilty about it. I read every single comment that we get. I get to respond to very, very few of them, but every single nice comment, every single link, every single thank you, I read every single one of them, and they mean the world to me. That's why I do the show. So until next time, this is the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm Bill Whittle signing off. We'll see you next week. You all have a good evening. Be careful out there. All right, bye-bye.